Hello and welcome. It's Thursday, the 20th of March. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. Ukraine announces plans to withdraw from Crimea after local forces abandon bases to Russian forces. The Korean government says it does not recognize Russia's annexation of the territory. In Janet Yellen's first act as chief, the U.S. Federal Reserve axes another $10 billion from its economic stimulus program. Interest rates, however, will be kept low well into the future. Plus, President Park Geunhye will chair talks with government officials and business leaders on this Thursday to discuss ways to remove unnecessary red tape on business activities. But our top story this morning, the Ukrainian government is making preparations to remove its troops from Crimea after more Ukrainian bases were taken over by Russian forces on Wednesday. Shin Se-min starts us off.
Surrendering to Russia's seizure of the Crimean peninsula, the head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council told reporters in Kiev Wednesday that Ukraine was planning to relocate 25,000 service personnel and families from the territory. His comments came before pro-Russian forces stormed two naval bases in Crimea on Wednesday night and raised the Russian flag. These were just the latest in a series of takeovers by Russian troops and local self-defense forces using a mixture of attrition and threats. In an attempt to keep its Western allies close, the Ukrainian government also announced Wednesday that it would hold joint military exercises with the U.S. and Britain. Speaking from the former Soviet Republic of Lithuania Wednesday, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden declared that the U.S. was absolutely committed to defending its allies.
I want to make it clear. We stand resolutely with our Baltic allies in support of the Ukrainian people and against Russian aggression. As long as Russia continues on this dark path, they will face increasing political and economic isolation.
UN Secretary General Park Geunhye will also meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Thursday to seek a peaceful end to the conflict. South Korea's foreign ministry released a statement Wednesday saying Seoul will not recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea and that it respects the sovereignty and independence of the Ukrainian government. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And staying with the Crimean crisis, the West and Russia seem to be digging in for a long confrontation over the annexation. But any further sanctions placed on Moscow will have an economic blowback effect on the US and Europe, as our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Despite threats from both sides of the Atlantic, Russian President Vladimir Putin is moving ahead with the annexation of Crimea. Could the tensions with the European Union and the United States escalate into a full-blown trade war? Such a scenario would hurt Russia, which relies heavily on the EU for trade. But it could hurt the European countries that account for more than 80% of Russia's oil exports and more than 75% of its natural gas. The trade volume between the EU and Russia is estimated at more than $460 billion. An economic crisis in Russia and a troubled EU would also deal a blow to the U.S. economy at a time when the Fed is trying to reverse its bond-buying stimulus program. So far, the EU has frozen assets and imposed travel bans on 21 Russians and Ukrainians. And the U.S. has imposed similar sanctions on 11 people. EU leaders may consider additional sanctions on Russia when they meet in Brussels next week. And the list is thought to contain more than 100 people. To put pressure on Putin, the EU and the U.S. could also seek to remove Russia from international bodies, such as the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank.
Then we have to recognize that there would be a very high risk of retaliatory sanctions by Russia against American companies and maybe Americans living in Russia.
Already in jeopardy are the many areas where the U.S. and Russia have cooperated. The two nations have been working to contain the spread of nuclear weapons. U.S. access to the International Space Station depends solely on Russian rocket launches. And American soldiers moving within Afghanistan fly through Russian airspace. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve will slash another $10 billion from its monthly bond buying program because of the progress of the economic recovery in the U.S. The central bank's policymaking committee says the Fed will add $55 billion in April to its holdings of Treasury and mortgage-backed securities, down from $65 billion in March and $85 billion in December. The decision was made following a two-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, the first to be headed by the new Fed chair, Janet Yellen. The Fed says it plans to continue trimming the asset purchases in, quote, measured steps as long as labour conditions show improvements and inflation shows signs of rising. The central bank also said it would hold its near-zero interest rate steady even after the US job market returns to full strength.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. President Park Geunhye has not minced her words about deregulation in recent days, going as far to describe red tape as a, quote, lump of cancer. She'll find out if everyone is on board with her ideas later on this Thursday when she meets with business leaders and government officials. Song Ji-son reports.
The ministerial-level meeting concerning deregulation that President Park Geunhye vowed to preside over has turned into a much broader discussion between the government and private sector. At 2 p.m. on Thursday, over 140 government officials and businessmen will sit down to discuss the government's push toward deregulation. Attendees will range from representatives of major economic organizations and large conglomerates to small and medium-sized companies who are expected to express their opinions on the reform proposals. President Park has stressed that deregulation, particularly in the service sector, is a key part of our creative economy vision. She has called repeatedly for lifting and relaxing regulations in a bold manner to help business build on creative ideas, saying deregulation is the fastest and easiest way to spur economic growth for the people. In a speech marking her first year in office last month, President Park reiterated her dedication toward reform.
이 모든 규제 개혁의 과정 하나하나를 제가 규제 장관 회의를 통해 직접 챙겨 나갈 것입니다.
Thursday's 4-hour discussion will be televised nationwide, completely unfiltered.
The discussion will proceed with enough time to discuss all subjects on the table, and the whole process will be open to the media.
After hearing from 20 representatives from the public sector in the first session, experts will present case studies and discuss ways to carry out regulatory reform. Song Ji-son, ARIRANG News.
A trilateral summit between Korea, Japan and the United States is in the offing for next week. Increasing US pressure and conciliatory gestures from Tokyo may bring the three countries together at the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague. Yulian reports.
Korea and Japan have seen relations dip in recent months due to lingering historical disputes. But the two countries, along with the United States, may meet for talks next week. Sources in Seoul say the Presidential Office of National Security is looking into the possibility of holding trilateral talks on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague next week. It cited thawing relations between Seoul and Tokyo as the reason. Last week, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe pledged to honor a previous government apology to Korean women who were forced into sexual slavery during World War II. President Park welcomed Abe's remarks the following day and said his decision was fortunate. The Japanese Prime Minister continued his overtures to Seoul earlier this week when he called Korea Japan's most important neighboring country, one that shares the same strategic interests and basic values. A government source adds that the United States' continued pressure on Korea and Japan to resolve their differences has also played a role in the possible trilateral summit. If the talks do take place, possible topics include North Korea's nuclear program, the state of affairs in the north after the purge and execution of Chang Song-taek, and other issues of mutual interest in Northeast Asia. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
And to raise awareness of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women and girls, college students here in Korea held demonstrations on campus for the very first time. It was a show of solidarity with ongoing weekly protests where Koreans gather in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul every Wednesday. Our foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
It's been 23 years since the citizens of Seoul began standing in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul every Wednesday alongside the survivors of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement. To this day, they continue to demand a resolution to the unsettled tragedy. This week, the voices extended throughout the capital.
These demonstrations urging Japan to apologize for its wartime sexual enslavement of women are being held simultaneously at 12 universities across Seoul. Now, by doing so, these college students are trying to cast light on the so-called comfort women issue.
Although the comfort women issue is making headlines at home and abroad, no action has been taken to resolve the issue. I decided to participate, hoping the students' voices could help resolve the matter.
The issue has become the biggest thorn in Korea-Japan relations. Seoul stressed Tuesday that Tokyo must take sincere steps in resolving the comfort women issue amid speculation of a possible summit between the two neighbors at next week's nuclear security summit at The Hague. Since taking office last year, President Park Geunhye has refused to meet with their Japanese counterpart, criticizing him for his distorted perception of history. Around 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military during the Second World War. Only 55 Korean survivors remain alive today, still waiting for a heartfelt apology from Japan. Back on campus, the students hope their efforts will contribute toward healing decades of pain.
I hope the comfort women whose human rights have been violated will be compensated, and I think our demonstrations will help create a society where justice can be practiced.
Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Red Cross and government officials from Japan and North Korea will resume their second and final day of talks in the northeastern Chinese city of Shenyang later today. They'll continue to discuss Pyongyang's return of the remains of Japanese nationals from the end of World War II. Japan's Kyodo News reports the first meeting Wednesday lasted about 8 hours, and both sides made some progress, but details were not disclosed. More attention is focused on the informal meetings between foreign ministry officials from the two sides. Japan is thought to be demanding an investigation into North Korea's abduction of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. Pyongyang wants Tokyo to ease sanctions on the regime. Now, China has shed some light on the country's top nuclear envoy's visit to Pyongyang. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson told reporters on Wednesday that Wu Da-wei arrived in North Korea on Monday for discussions on the state of affairs on the Korean peninsula and the resumption of the six-party talks that have been stalled since late 2008. His trip follows one by China's Vice Foreign Minister Liu Zhenmin last week. The back-to-back visits are aimed at bringing Pyongyang back to the table for denuclearization dialogue that involves the two Koreas, the US, China, Japan and Russia. Now, for some cultural news, the National Gugat Center kicks off its new season with a traditional performance of royal court music this week. The ritual music is not only Korea's #1 cultural property, but it's also registered as a UNESCO masterpiece. Our Park Ji-won reports.
This solemn and graceful music is part of the Chongmyo Taereak, royal ritual music that has been performed in Korea for more than 600 years. The music was composed in the 15th century by King Sejong the Great, the fourth king of the Joseon dynasty, to honor his royal ancestors and pray for the peace and stability of the country. The music is performed during royal ancestral rites that were once held at least 5 times a year in front of Chongmyo. The structure is an ancient shrine housing the remains of the kings and queens of the Joseon dynasty, the last dynasty of Korea that existed from the 14th to the late 19th century. This collection of instrumental music, song, and dance is Korea's important intangible cultural property #1 and was designated by UNESCO as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity in 2001.
This ritual music is simple rather than showing off rich melodies as it greets the spirits of our ancestors during ancestral rites. The solemn music calms and soothes the souls of listeners as well.
The royal ancestral rite is now held just once a year at Jongmyo Shrine on the first Sunday in May, and it is very rare for the royal ritual music to be presented on a stage. But for the first time in 5 years, the National Kugak Center will bring the music to the stage in a 70-minute performance held over 2 nights on Thursday and Friday. Starting this week, the National Kugak Center will present a series featuring traditional Korean music and dance, including concerts of royal court music and pansori, a style of narrative singing. Park Geunhye, ARIRANG News.
Now, for a look at some of the other international headlines we are following at this hour, we are going to turn it over to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at our news centre. Good morning to you, Eunice. Do you have anything extra to report on the search for this missing Malaysia Airlines plane?
Hi, Mark. Yeah, still no major leads. What we are hearing, though, is that the FBI is helping Malaysian police analyze a flight simulator taken from the home of the captain of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Malaysia's police chief said a data log on the simulator had been deleted about a month before the Boeing 777 went missing. Malaysian authorities are also saying they are analyzing some radar data from other countries without specifying. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, Malaysia's acting transport minister said that background checks on all but 3 of the 239 people on board have produced no significant information. They're still waiting on background checks from Russia and Ukraine. And on to some other news. In the United States, Toyota will pay $1.2 billion following a 4-year investigation by U.S. regulators on the Japanese auto giant. The settlement is the largest criminal penalty to date imposed on an automaker in the United States. Toyota had recalled more than 10 million cars, including its popular Camry model, due to problems related to their brakes, accelerator pedals, and floor mats. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder said Toyota had misled the public, federal regulators, and members of Congress to conceal safety issues of which they were aware. Thousands of demonstrators, mostly university students, stormed Taiwan's parliament Wednesday to protest its trade deal with China. They say the agreement would hurt Taiwan's economy and leave the country vulnerable to pressure from Beijing. China is Taiwan's biggest trading partner, and the trade pact is meant to open up each other's services market in as many as 80 industries, including banking and e-commerce. Taiwan Central News Agency called the occupation by demonstrators unprecedented. Crowds gathered outside the complex as well. Fugitive former NSA contractor Edward Snowden made a surprise appearance at a TED conference in Vancouver, not in person, but via a web link-up. The session was moderated by web inventor Sir Tim Berners-Lee. Snowden told his audience some of the most important reporting to be done is yet to come, while making a case that the U.S. National Security Agency had violated their own rules thousands of times in a year. He called on technology firms to do more in protecting privacy, suggesting internet companies encrypt every page users visit.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off in the LPGA with the LPGA Founders Cup kicking off in Phoenix, Arizona on Thursday, U.S. time. for world number 1 Park Geunhye, she'll be going after her first LPGA title of the season. Now, after claiming her first title at the Ladies European Tour World Ladies Championship earlier this month, she'll now be going after her first LPGA title of the season. And to make it even more interesting, fans have been following the battle between Park Geunhye and Suzanne Pettersson, with Park Geunhye finishing higher in 2 of the 3 events so far. And staying with golf, we're over in the PGA, where Tiger's back continues to be a problem as he pulled out of the upcoming Arnold Palmer Invitational. Despite fans hoping to see the number 1 PGA golfer, it was the same back problem that caused him to pull out of the Honda Classic and struggle during the Cadillac Championship this month. The 38-year-old has been dealing with a couple of injuries during the past few years as he hopes to bounce back and add his 15th major title. And moving over to Korea's national sport of Taekwondo, as the World Taekwondo Federation hopes to get the sport added onto the 2020 Paralympics. Now, with the sport getting the nod for the 2020 Summer Games in Tokyo, the World Taekwondo Federation hopes to have the sport be included in the Paralympics as well, with Taekwondo and badminton being in the list of possible events to be included. If the sport gets the green light for 2020, the sport will be a part of 5 major international sporting events. And shifting over to last night's AFC Champions League results, with FC Seoul taking on Hiroshima, Rafael Costa leveled the match at 1-1 in the 60th minute before Tsukasa Shiotani scores in the 78th as Hiroshima took the match 2-1. Meanwhile, Ulsan Hyundai Tigers taking on Guizhou, both sides drew 1-1 after a late goal from Hao Yang of Guizhou. And with that, moving over to Game 4 of the best-of-5 series in the first round of the KBL playoffs between the Seoul SK Knights and the Goyang Orions. Of course, going into the game here, the SK Knights off to a nice start as they take a 21-17 lead before shredding up Goyang's defense in the second quarter as they take a comfortable 41-26 lead going into halftime. Second half of the game, the Orions with a huge fourth quarter rally, but with Courtney Sims putting up 14 points and 15 boards on the night. SK holds on to take this game 63-60 and wins the series 3-1. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, it's going to be windy, wet, and chilly day today as daily highs will only rise to low teens in the Seoul metro area and mid-teens down south. And right now, the nation is covered with lots of clouds, and these clouds are dropping showers here and there. So sporadic showers are expected around the country during the day. So the parts of the country can expect to receive somewhere between 5 to 10 millimeters of showers, but a bit heavier in regions in Gangwon. But the thing is, the rain in Gangwon could turn to snow later in the afternoon. In fact, heavy snow advisory was issued this morning, expecting up to 20 centimeters of heavy snowfall in the mountainous regions in Gangwon-do. But overall, it's not going to be a murky day today, though. Clouds can be replaced by a bit of sunshine at times. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. The afternoon highs in the capital and Gwangju will rise to 11, while Daegu and Busan should top out at 15 and 16 respectively. Now, for other regions, it looks like down on Jeju will climb up to 11, Daejeon will reach to 12, while Dokdo hikes up to 7, and Mount Kumgang sees a high of -1 this afternoon. Well, please dress warmer today and hope you have a wonderful day.
And that does it for now. We'll be back at noon Korea time. In the meantime, you can always catch up with what's been happening news-wise on our website, arirang.co.kr/news.